Hello, sei Charata. Have you ever looked down to your notebook and then you felt confused because you couldn't understand what was written? But how is that possible? I mean, the notebook is yours. And if the notes were taken in your own handwriting, in your own words, you should be the fittest person in the world to understand it. Nonetheless, it is not always like that. The reason that helps to explain this paradox is that your notes were not correctly taken. There is a right way to take notes, a proven method for taking notes that actually helps in the learning process. And that is why we'll talk about special techniques that will help you to take good notes and therefore help you to learn any subject. To store the information you have studied into your long-term memory, you will need good quality notes. You need to understand 2 points about the learning process: input and output. The input of information is an essential phase in which the content is saved in your brain. You need to put that information into your long-term memory using your own words. By using your own words, it will be easier for your brain to access that information and facilitate the extraction at the right time. If you understood it well, you will remember it well. The better you record information into your brain, the easier it will be to retrieve that information whenever you need it. You need to prepare yourself if you really want the information that you have just studied to stay in your long-term memory. And to do that, you will need to take good quality notes. Now, be careful when you're using digital tools to take notes. You should continue to use your critical thinking and not just transcribe the lecture. You see, one of the main choices that you'll have to make is whether you'll be taking your notes on paper or using a digital tool. Now, speed is a great advantage when you're using a digital tool, but that leverage could become also your biggest problem. Typing fast on a laptop is it is very easy to do. That is why there is the risk of focusing mainly on the process of typing correctly on your laptop, and in this way, you'll be less concentrated on thinking about the content that is being taught to you. There is a basic rule about learning, and this rule says that the more your brain gets actively involved with the content that you're studying, the better you learn. The more passively you study, the less you learn. The process of taking notes itself is a very important part of this studying process. Ideally, there should be an active process while you're taking notes. Your brain should make an effort and understand what is being taught in class or in the reference book that you're studying from, and transform that content into notes by using your own words. When you use the advantages of a keyboard or even a digital voice recognition tool, you take the risk of taking long and repetitive notes. And this way you only reproduce the content that was presented to you, but you haven't necessarily understood it completely. On the other side, handwriting is usually a slower process. There are speed limits when you're taking notes because of your hand muscle movements. And that is why you usually write fewer words when you're taking notes. This will force you to be selective and focus on the keywords that really transmit the knowledge. Reduce the number of distractions. The process of taking notes deserves your full focus and attention. When you're taking notes using digital tools, you have to make an extra effort to type more slowly. You have to pay more attention to the content of the lecture or of the book that you're reading. Reflect to see if you have understood it well. Carefully select a few keywords that really represent the essence of that content. And then you write down only those words, those short sentences. People who write long sentences because they can type fast usually make the mistake of thinking that they will be able to revise the notes back home and make another round of study to summarize the information. And this is not the best thing to do, as it's just making you work twice. Another risk of using electronic tools to take notes is that you will probably be more distracted by any type of notification on your screen, and social media, news websites, every other type of distraction will just be one click away. So in case you want to use digital tools to take notes, try to use programs with a full screen option that will help you to get less distracted. An advantage that writing on paper has is that you will not need this type of self-control. The nature of manually writing your notes will make you think hard and be concentrated and focus on comprehending what is being said. If you don't understand the content well, you will not be able to take good notes. Learn to identify the keywords and main ideas so you can take good notes. Write down questions to make an active retrieval. What should you write down? Main ideas, defined terms, conclusions, examples, even questions. When you attend a good class, or if you use good quality materials, the examples they give you will capture the essence of whatever is being taught. And if you manage to understand well why they used that example, you will probably have understood the theory behind it. Many times, exceptions also help you to understand the general rule. And you can practice to differentiate the idea and the way of explaining that idea. You see, the author of the book that you're reading or the teacher in your classroom, they're people who are trying to pass an idea on to you. Pay less attention to the specific way that they're trying to teach you that idea. Pay more attention to the idea itself, going to a more abstract level. Besides that, you should write down questions for yourself. Remember, the more your brain is actively involved with the study, the more you will learn. So instead of simply taking notes of the content itself, write down questions about that content too, maybe in a column on the right side of your notes. And in that way, when you are revising your notes, you can cover the content and see the questions that you wrote. And this is called active recall. It has been proven to be one of the best ways of testing whether you have really learned the things that you're studying. If you are studying for an exam, your studying technique should be focused on getting the highest grade possible. Unfortunately, truly learning and getting a good grade on an exam, they are two completely different things. It is possible for someone to actually learn very little on the subject matter and yet get a good grade, and it's also possible for someone who has learned a lot to unfortunately get a bad grade. You need to put your effort into understanding how the test will be done and what kind of questions you have to answer. Now, if it is possible, try to gain access to the questions that are usually asked in those exams. Your notes should contain all the necessary information to answer the questions that will probably be asked in the exam. Pay special attention whenever your teacher says that certain content is important. In those moments, you should always take notes. Your teacher will probably talk about those things in the exam as well. Obviously, besides staying focused on the possible questions, you should also practice some exercises from the previous exams. This is the only way you will know for sure that you're able to get the right answers by yourself. Something that always happens is that we think that we understand something in theory, but when we're taking the test, we find out that we don't understand anything. This is the famous illusion of knowledge. You can use these 3 specific techniques to take notes. You can do the outline, the Cornell method, and mind maps. I'm only going to briefly explain the proven methods for you to take notes. The outline method, the Cornell method, and mind mapping. In the outline method, you simply have to make bullet points with different levels of details. At the top left, you have to write the main concept. And every secondary concept will be placed a little lower and to the right in a hierarchical order, and a secondary concept can also have different third-level details. This method makes everything look well organized, but when you're dealing with long and complex information, this might not be the best choice, as it is quite strict. And that is why I'll also tell you about the Cornell method, that has such a name because it was created by Professor Walter Polk from the Cornell University. To take notes, following the Cornell method, you have to divide your paper into 3 parts, called cues, notes, and summary. The first part, on the right, will be used to take notes and charts and drawings, schemes, connections between ideas. Reflect on the key message from what you're studying and think about how you would teach that to someone else. Use abbreviations and symbols so that you understand, so you don't have to write it word by word. The second part on the left column will be used to write questions. Write down questions about what you're learning. Since there is not much space, make short and simple questions that will help you to remember the content when you take the exam. And finally, on the third part of the paper, down at the bottom, write a super summary. in 1 or 2 sentences that captures the essence of everything that you have written down on the paper. This will give you a panoramic idea of everything that the page contains, and it is an excellent exercise to continue the learning process because you have to explain it in a very different way because of the space limit. Whenever you are going to study, it is best to cover the notes and summary columns with your hand or with a piece of paper and focus only on the questions column. Read the questions that you have written down and try to actively retrieve the answer to all these questions from your memory. By doing this, you will always be testing yourself and involving your brain in the learning process. And lastly, another known technique is mind mapping, which consists of a main idea placed in the center of the page and different connected ideas branching around it. It can also be used with conceptual keywords and colors and drawings. The secret to learn anything is intelligent persistence. There is no magic involved when trying to learn something, but there is persistence. When you have a very difficult problem at hand, use all the time that you have. Don't be like the other people who lose their patience and they want to know the answer immediately. You have to make an effort and persevere until you find the right answer on your own. When you're taking and revising notes, talk to yourself, think about different hypotheses, ask yourself why that answer is not working, ask what other theories you could implement to solve that problem, and try to recreate the process of getting to that conclusion or that theory from your own notes without consulting the reference materials. The thing that separates good students from weak performance students is persistence. There are studies that show that you just need to evaluate the level of persistence of a student to foresee whether they will have a good performance or a weak performance at some type of an exam. To master the art of taking notes and learning any subject, you need technique, discipline, and persistence to continue improving your skills. You have learned the technique here. Now, discipline and persistence depend only on you. There is no such thing as a single perfect method of taking notes. There are just good guidelines to taking notes. You need to find a note-taking method that works best for you. A good method will allow you to have persistence and always keep studying. It is not useful to have a method that works wonders in theory, but that you cannot put into practice daily, so it won't have the necessary duration for you to keep improving. Remember that note-taking cannot be a mere word-by-word copy of the content that you're studying. You must put your effort into understanding and being able to explain the same idea using less words. The more your brain is involved in the process in a creative way, the better your learning will be. And to learn this or any other subject, you need to strengthen your focus and persistence. And if you want to accelerate your learning speed by using science-proven techniques, I invite you to visit harata.se/intelligence.